Hi everyone, my name is Aram, and today I'm going to be talking about the basic websites you should build to understand Drupal better. Before going into all the technical details and mentioning the exact types of websites you should build, I'll just say a few words about me. So my name is Aram, as I said, so it's A-R-A-M. I've been working with Drupal since version 5. I'm actually a project manager and a developer. I maintain several Drupal projects, and I work with a wide range of both projects and people. The last two items on the list are what inspired me to give this presentation, because I saw that there was a lot of things that needed to be maybe done differently. To preface all this, I do assume that you are familiar with the basics of Drupal site building. So that you can make a basic website, that you know how to deploy it, that you know how to perform a migration, etc. So those are the things I will leave out from this presentation. I will not be mentioning that. And of course, a prerequisite would be that you really want to expand your Drupal knowledge. So this is aimed towards people that feel that they are lacking in certain regards, and that there are certain things they need to make up with. So to put you in the right mindset, I'm going to talk briefly about what can you build actually with Drupal. So here you have like 11 items, 11 types of websites that you can build with Drupal. You see they range from APIs to community websites to online stores to intranet to fulfillment systems, etc. So if you would show this list to a client or to someone who's not familiar with Drupal, they would be pretty excited, because that means that Drupal can build almost any kind of website. And that would be true. However, this ability has several downsides. So in order for Drupal to allow you to build all these different types of websites, it means that it has abstract components and abstract modules. So if you, for example, explain what does rules module do to someone who is used to WordPress, it will be harder a bit to explain, because rules doesn't do anything on its own. But it is a very open-ended module that you can use to build almost any kind of workflow on your website. Now, these type of modules just take some time to get to understand, to be able to use them to the max. Now, the more abstract components and modules means that there are more things to know. You need to understand what are the basic ways of setting up things, and there are some gotchas, etc. How do they work together, and so on. The more things you know the learning curve is steeper and it's more time consuming. So there are different approaches for different projects. The way you set up a community website is not the same the way you set up an e-commerce website. So when you look at all these things, that there are like dozens of main types of websites you can build with Drupal, you start questioning, how do you actually become a well-rounded developer? So to become a well-rounded developer, actually, how to become a well-rounded developer would be a question not only for back-end developers, but for front-end developers and for site builders. Because all these three, let's say, segments of working with Drupal are affected with the type of Drupal site you're building. And you might ask me, why is this important at all? Why would I want to be a well-rounded developer? Well, first off, sites are not, in most cases, sites are not straightforward. You often have sites that become something else over time, or sites that combine multiple features. So understanding all this, having a good understanding of all the things you can build with Drupal will help you make better decisions, will help you better plan how to make your custom modules and how to structure the website. And simply you will learn different ways to structure the website. So what I want to present is a simple idea that you build a website, be it on your server or on your computer, it doesn't matter. So you write down the requirements you want to do, you develop it based on those requirements, and you maintain it over a period of time. And ideally, if you do have time, if you do have the will, you write some custom modules. Now, the reason I put there maintain it is that this is not really a project for an afternoon. So this is something you do, let's say you leave it on for a couple of weeks, because it will really help you understand what does each component do. And by maintaining it, I also mean extending the features. So let's say in the requirements phase, you make an e-commerce, And then after some time you want to add something extra to it, say fulfillment integration or something else. Now, if you are doing that on a project that you are already familiar, you will see which component works and how you can use it, what can happen, what you did wrong, what you did right. So the structure in which I will present the 5 main types of Drupal websites I selected will be the requirements, some basic requirements that kind of website should do, main modules to use. Of course, here there will be a gotcha in the sense that some of the modules, some of the more specific modules are still not stable for Drupal 8 or not even ported for Drupal 8. However, I think this is still very relevant because you might get a project where you need to make, I don't know, a social networking website, which you might not be able to do in 8, simply because there are not enough modules that are ported. And I will underline also what to learn. So there are 3 things also to remember before I start. So the goal of this presentation is to give you ideas, not to give you technical details. There is no way in 45 minutes I can really cram all these technical information that you might use for 5 different types of websites that are complex. No way. The main takeaway from this is ideas. So, because if you have a general picture, you will find the technical details you need. It doesn't go the other way around. If you have never been using the context module, and if you start reading the documentation and you don't know when you will be using it, it's kind of useless, it's pointless. But if it goes the other way around, it makes a lot more sense. And you will know what you need to pick up from there, what you need to learn. So this is the point of my presentation. So I will present you now 5 main categories of websites that I believe will help you the most professionally, that will make you a well-rounded Drupal developer. So the first one is, of course, e-commerce. Basically, if you need to explain in one sentence what is an online store, it's basically a website that sells products or services online. Requirements for something like that would be generic enough to help you build almost any kind of e-commerce would be that it would have payments and shipping integration, that we have discounts and coupons, that it has categorization, inventory management, different types of products, search with filters, and a client area. Now I will cover each one of these briefly. So when I say payment and shipping, payment of course is integration with a payment processor that is actually taking the money from your clients and giving you a green light that you can give the products or service to the client. Shipping integration is very important and something that a lot of people don't fully understand. Shipping is not something that you just select on the last page of the checkout and you just get charged for that much. Shipping can be integrated with external services such as fulfillment systems. It basically happens in a lot of cases where you are only the one who takes the order and then someone else is shipping the order from you. So shipping is also very important for any e-commerce system. And of course there are many different types of shipments. You can use USPS, UPS, you can use quantity-based shipping, you can use weight-based shipping, whatever. It depends on what kind of products are you selling. Discounts and coupons are also important, and they're a bit different, even though for most people they're more or less the same. Coupons are mostly referring to coupon codes, meaning a short string that you enter on a checkout that gives you something extra or lowers the price or makes it better for you. Discounts are something like all products have 10% off in December. So instead of updating every single product, you would create a discount that would be valid for the whole month. Categorization for an e-commerce website. It is like one of the websites that I like to mention the most would be the jewelry websites, because they often have many different types of products. So categorization and different types of products are very hard, can be hard to understand. So I think the best example for building an e-commerce website would be building something like a jewelry website, because there are so many types of jewelry and everything can be so much customized. So you have the chains, you have the necklaces, you have the rings, you have the earrings. So many different categories, maybe many different sets of categories, and many different types of products, each of which can be customized. Search with filters, of course, it's one of the crucial parts of e-commerce, because without that your customers won't be able to really find the products. And the client area. So what would be actually the modules you would be using for an e-commerce website? Speaking about e-commerce in Drupal, there are two main modules, the Commerce, Drupal Commerce, and UberCart. I recommend you to try UberCart and to understand the difference between UberCart and Commerce. In most cases, you will be using Commerce because it will be more complex and it will give you greater flexibility. However, there are certain cases where UberCart is just plain better than Commerce. I don't think we have any Commerce guys in the room, so yeah. But basically, UberCart is better for very simple e-commerce websites. If you need something where you will have low number of products, it will be a standard e-commerce website. You would most likely use UberCart because it gives you everything out of the box. However, Drupal Commerce is much more complex. For Drupal Commerce, you will need to understand the way it is set up and the way it organizes the data. I will cover that in the third column, which will be the things you will learn. Other than that, by the way, all these blue things, you can find the presentation here, and all these blue words are links actually, so you can click there and go. When it comes to shipping, I did not include specific modules because it really depends on what kind of shipping integration you need. It can be USPS, UPS, item-based, weight-based, or whatever. There are many different types of shipping. Same with discounts and coupons. However, discounts and coupons are separate modules for Drupal 7 in Commerce, whereas they're included for Drupal 8. And of course, there are reports and back office modules that you would use for presenting the sales data to the client. For creating search with filters, you would use Search API module. So what you actually should learn with, when doing an e-commerce website. So the main thing is the structure of an e-commerce website, especially if we are talking about Drupal Commerce. Because in Drupal Commerce, everything is an entity, and it's really abstract the way it organizes the data, but once you understand it, it makes a lot more sense. So when you have a shopping cart, in UberCart, it's a simple reference to the product. Whereas in Commerce, you have line items, which are separate entities, and each line item represents a relation to a product or to an extra service, such as tax, shipping, or something else. So this takes some time to understand, not only how does it work, but also how can you use that data. Because representing commerce entities and commerce data through views and getting values through rules, etc., is a bit different than with UberCart. It's important to understand how do the payments work. What do you need to do when you want to charge a credit card? How does it work when you integrate with PayPal? What are the steps, etc. Also, it's important to understand maybe PCI compliance if your client is bigger. Importance of having an SSL certificate, and so on. You would also need to pay attention to categorization, especially if, now this sounds pretty simple, but when you say like just using taxonomies and terms to categorize products, it might be a bit trickier to show that on the front end and make it easy for the client to work. So categories, depending on what kind of e-commerce website you want to build as an exercise, categorization might or might not be something you need to look more into. Setting up search filters is extremely important, especially if it's something updated through Ajax. So if you have, for example, you go in a category of all jewelry, and then you see all the chains, and maybe you want to filter them based on the, I don't know, the material of the, is it gold, white gold, red gold, I don't know what is there, rose gold, and so you would have them as filters, and you might need to show, for example, the number of products. That setup is not very easy. And of course, you need to learn how to organize the administrative panel. I'll just say one more thing for the commerce. There is a Drupal distribution called Commerce Kickstart, which is great, but don't use it for this. Because it just sets up everything magically, and you don't know actually how are things connected. So I really recommend maybe having a separate installation with Drupal, with Commerce Kickstart, just to have a look how did they do it, and then you try to replicate everything from the start. Because that way you will really learn why do I actually need this module, why did they do this, how did they connect actually these two. It will be much more useful. The next type of website is multilingual. So it's basically a content website in several languages. Now I think most of the people that came to this camp will be non-native English speakers, which is to your advantage. So when you're making an exercise website, you really can pick English and your own language, or any language you feel you're familiar with. Now, the requirements for a multilingual website can be pretty simple, just not to distract you from what you need to get. So requirements would be you make just a simple personal or a corporate website in 2 or more languages. Now, the more languages you add, the more work you will have. So you really need to pay attention there. So it's not as easy. If you want to make a portal in 12 languages, it's a lot of work, a lot. So you just need to understand that there. You need to add some nodes, some things to be translated. So those are nodes, blocks, menus, and terms, for example. You don't need to go too much with contrib modules. You can use what the core gives you, just to understand the basic principle. So the modules you would be using for this would be the core modules, internalization, and language update. And of course, rules, views, web form, and a variable, because they will be the binding blocks between a multilingual website with any other module you will be using. Most likely that will be, I don't know, if you're making an online store in multiple languages, you will be using a lot rules, a lot views, etc. So understanding how to translate views output or rules messages, etc. is quite important. So what you actually should learn to do with a multilingual website is how to translate every single thing on a website. Really, it's much harder than it sounds. So you need to learn how to translate the nodes, the blocks. Very often you might need extra modules that will provide you a very minuscule thing to translate, but still it's something you need to learn. Terms, menus, views, and rules. Now, with configuration, you have also option for translation. So that means, for example, if you go to site information, you have the site name. That's actually a configuration, which is served as a system administrative form, and it's just stored as a setting. But you actually need that to be translated as well. So multiple languages might have different settings. You also need to learn how to do that. Language detection is another thing you need to understand. There are multiple ways the language can be automatically set. You can just have a default language in English for the website. However, Drupal gives you an opportunity to select it, to automatically select the correct language based on the language of the visitor or based on the link it used, etc. And of course, best practices, especially if you will be writing custom modules, of course, using translation interface, and also the way you are writing strings. So you generally try, if it's a developer message, you generally try to make it as generic as possible and to pass everything as arguments, not to pollute the translation index. So the third type of website you should build would be a community, which is basically a social network for people that share a common interest. The requirements for a community website would be that you have a few different types of users, meaning regular members, moderators, and administrators. Regular members are the ones that are using it on the front end. Moderators are controlling or moderating what the regular members do. And administrators are building the website and controlling everything from the back end. Social network websites usually need to have some sort of private ways of communicating and public ways of communicating. When I say private, it's usually private messages, so one-to-one, you send messages. Public messaging means forum or any other, or articles or blogs, or for example, if every single user on your community needs to write its own blog. And you of course need to have publishing moderation in order to fight spam and prevent abuse. And there is another item over here which will take a lot of your time most likely if you decide to check it out, and it's user groups. Basically, just like on Facebook when you can make a group and we can invite people, there is a module in Drupal called organic groups that allows you to do that. So the main modules you would be using for a community website are, unfortunately, most of them are for Drupal 7. So if you really need to build a community right now, you will most likely do it in 7. Not something I'm happy about, but it's just the way it is. So the modules you'll be using are the private message. It's used for sending direct messages between users, and it's Drupal 7 only. I'm not sure I think the port is not even started yet, so I'm not sure when will that be. There is a profile module which is for Drupal 8 and profile 2 for Drupal 7. It allows you to have configurable user profiles. It's basically a separate entity that is attached to a user entity. So that way you can have multiple profiles for each user and multiple profiles for roles and so on, which is important for social network websites. The third module is organic groups. Now this one is a biggie, and you might even want to do it on a separate installation just to understand how does it work. Simply put, organic groups allows you as administrator and also users to make groups, subgroups on your website. So if you have, for example, a social network for people that love books, so they could make organic group for all the people that like science fiction. And they can make a group for all the people that like, I don't know, classical books and so on. And the organic groups also gives you a way to post content. And that content can have very granular access control. So only the people within the group can see it, or both people within the group and outside the group can see it, and so on. And it has administrative processes. So organic group is a bit more complex module to understand. The next few modules are more or less explanatory. Auto-assign role module allows users to select which roles they want to get upon registration. Login toboggan it has certain improvements to the default registration and login forms, and it has some nice extras for Drupal 7. User relationships allows you to have friend connections and, I don't know, friends, family, etc. You can create multiple of these relationships. User points grants configurable points. You can even have multiple. For example, you can have a ranking just like on Stack Overflow. So people can, once they receive an upvote for something they posted, user points module can grant them points, and then based on that you can link them, you can rank them or order them, etc. Flag module is something that you might want to use for anti-spam because it allows users to flag content, and you can do whatever you want after that with it. Content access is something that is used for preventing unauthorized access to nodes, and is something you might want to look here into as well. And of course Mollem, which is a module by Mollem company, which is by Dries, I think, as far as I know. So Acquia is working on Mollem, and it's an anti-spam module. So what you should actually learn, you should learn to set up user profiles and how to configure fields for user profiles, and to have them maybe separately for different roles. You need to learn how to use organic groups. This will take a lot of time, as I explained here. And you will need to learn how to handle public and private content. Now, when I say handling private and public content, that means having some sort of either moderation or making sure that there will be no abuse. So when you have private messages, you don't want everyone just messaging you as an administrator. So you might want to enforce a quota, so maximum, I don't know, 5-10 messages per hour can be sent, or something like that. And of course, setting up the content access, which is necessary for organic groups or whichever way you want to organize your community in. The next one is my favorite simply because of the complexity, and I think it's easier to understand in certain ways than others. It's basically information portal. Information portal is a website with a lot of content. Now, sounds pretty easy, but the thing is that a lot of content needs to be organized in certain ways. So you'll have most likely sections, you will have subsections, categories, articles, static pages, and so on. So what would be the requirements? So you would have, I'm sorry. Okay, I do apologize for the first one. It seems that it somehow was stuck from the previous one, but I will correct myself. So the first one is not regular members, moderators, and administrators. You will have the regular members, which are the anonymous visitors. You would have the editors and administrators. The site would need to have different sections. Different sections means that if it's, how many of you are actually Czech? None, few, very few, okay. So there is expats.cz website. So you know that it has many different sections. You know, you have a job board, you have real estate part, you have this and that. So it has many different sections, that is one of the main characteristics of information portals. So you need some sort of way to organize all that content. You need to have publishing moderation. I will explain this in a second. You need to fight spam, and you need to have a good search that will reach all the pieces of content you have. So what are the modules that you would be using? So in order to provide publishing moderation, you could even have, very often publishing houses have different levels of editors. So a junior editor could write an article and submit it to the system. Then the ones that are above him would receive an email. They would come to the website, revise that, and only after that they would publish it to the site. Now this is a publishing workflow. So basically, Workbench and Workflow would help people that are working only with content on your website. Apart from that, there is a very useful module called Context. It allows you to create contextual sections of your website. Context is extremely flexible, and it's easy to use, and at the same time it's extremely flexible and powerful. It allows you to associate certain parts of the website together. So you can have, for example, an extra class on the body field, or if you want one menu item to be selected when you go all the way to the blog posts, and to keep, I don't know, articles selected. So it can group based on any rule. It can be a taxonomy or URL or selected menu and so on. It can group parts of your website and allow you to and provide you a way to perform an action. So for example, to make this item selected, or to give an extra class to the background, or to show certain blocks, and so on. The next one is Skinner. The Skinner module is very useful for editors, because with information portals you will most likely not have some sort of administrators working on the site. You will have dedicated people that are in charge for a certain section. So you need to give them tools so they don't need to get too technical, but at the same time they can change how things look. So when they create a block right now in Drupal 8, you have you can create types of blocks. But even that is in certain ways limited, because you cannot switch a type of a block. So if you have a block called add and you have a block called, I don't know, text, you cannot really switch the type of the two if you want to show them differently. However, with the Skinner module, it allows you to attach extra classes simply by editing a block. So you can programmatically define what kind of types of blocks you want to have, and editors will be able to check. So for example, if this is a banner with an image on top, they can just select that as a checkbox, and it will automatically apply an extra class, and then you can style it any way you want. And of course, one of the modules I think you will be using in Drupal 7 at least would be the boost. In Drupal 8, that would be the regular caching mechanism included in the core, because most likely majority of your traffic will come from anonymous users, so it will need to be optimized for them more rather than for the authenticated users. And Search API, of course, for finding all the content. So what you actually need to learn when it comes to information portals. So first, how to structure the content, how to display it on the website, how you can actually make a logical structure so it makes sense for the back end and for the front end. Second thing to learn is how to create and configure workflows, or actually publishing workflows. So if an editor comes, he publishes an article, it gets sent somewhere, someone approves it. So all those stages will be given to you by the Workbench and Workflow module, and Workbench will allow you to present that in a nice way, in a non-technical way. The next thing to learn, it would be the caching content. If you're on 8, most likely this will just boil down to enabling the caching mechanism. Whereas on 7, it will take some time to learn how to use Boost. In case you're not familiar with Boost, are you familiar with Boost or no? Can you please raise hands? A bit, some. Basically, Boost creates caches HTML snapshots of your website, and instead of it bypasses completely the PHP layer, it just serves static HTML of your website. So it's extremely fast, and it is not exactly the same as what you have in Drupal 8, but so far there is no Drupal 8 version of Boost, so that's why I wrote there only Drupal 7. And next things to learn are the sectioning the website, which is similar to structuring the content, allowing editors to customize the look using context and Skinner modules, And of course, fighting against bots, meaning the spam, and generally about to fight the misuse of the website. The last item I want to talk about, the last website I want to talk about is an API. So just like on the opening speech on the future of Drupal, having decoupled Drupal or a headless Drupal will most likely become more and more important in the future, because you might have a Drupal backend that features your front-end website, which is a JavaScript application, and maybe that will be used for managing your native apps, for an iOS, for an Android app, or whatever. So for API, I don't think you need to go too complex. You just need to understand the basics. So the requirements would be that you simply have some content that you need to that you need to expose. So for example, there will be just a regular content website with some exposed nodes, users, and terms. So it can be a regular blog website, anything you want. It needs to have, for example, authentication, so that only authorized, let's say, requests can be made, and ability to create nodes, users, and terms through an API. So meaning CRUD operations through an API. So what are the modules you would be using for this? Now the list is pretty short, but the only modules you'd be using are the ones that are in Drupal 8 core, or if you're on Drupal 7, you'd be using the services module. Now the services also exist for Drupal 8, but it focuses on non-RESTful services or protocols, which are not something really you might want to do from the beginning. So if you're using Drupal 8, stick with what is there in the core. If you're using Drupal 7 for whatever reason, check out the services module. And basically, what you need to learn is how to set up the authentication, because, for example, if you have an app that needs to communicate with your backend, you don't want really unauthorized requests to be allowed. So with every request, there needs to be, at the beginning, there needs to be authentication process, and then after that, all the requests need to be allowed by the system. Second thing you need to learn is how to expose entities through an API. So with Drupal 8, you will have controls in the Drupal core that will allow you to do so. In services module for Drupal 7, you will again be able to choose what exactly can be exposed. So if we're talking about nodes, you can choose which node types can be exposed through an API. Next thing is configuring CRUD through an API. Why I said configuring CRUD, even though it's just a matter of enabling or disabling, is that with CRUD you need to be very careful so that people have proper permissions. So if you accidentally allow people also to delete things they shouldn't be allowed to, then you will lose information. You'll have to make it up additionally. So now another thing you might want to do here is to completely disable the front end. Now it depends if you are familiar with some of the JavaScript frameworks that are used for JS apps. You might want to experiment, for example, to completely replace Drupal frontend with, I don't know, an app made in Angular. Or if you know Java or you're familiar with Android or iOS development, you could make a simple app that will be just pulling all the information from a Drupal website. So that would be more or less it when it comes to APIs. I have just a few final notes. I would really encourage you to write custom modules, because a lot of these main modules that I mentioned, for example, Drupal Commerce or Context or Search API, they differ in the way you integrate with them. And if you already have some experience, it will be much easier to go deeper rather than if you have to do it in the last moment. The second point is extremely important. You need to go extra mile for the details. So when you have a requirement list, and you did most of it, you have that 80-20% rule. So basically, 80% of the features will be done in 20% of the time, 20% of the features will be done in 80% of the time. So you will be able to set all these websites pretty fast, majority of the requirements, but then the remaining, the last bits, for example, configuring search or doing something more specific, will take a lot of time. Like you will be able to set up, I don't know, information portal in half a day or a day just for testing, and then you will spend 5 days just making sections and setting everything up in it. But that extra mile will really help you with experience. Without that extra mile, you did nothing, honestly. And it's important that you combine different types of websites. What I gave you here would be the main categories, main kinds of websites you could build. But of course, you can have combinations. You can have an e-commerce website with a social feature, or you can have an informational portal with an online store. It can be anything. And the last one is something that I do a lot. It's basically create sites for personal use, because you know the best of requirements and you know the best how you want things to be. And so you will find in a lot of, quite often clients cannot really translate what they need, and you will not go too deep in order to solve their issues, simply because they will be satisfied with something in the middle, etc. But if you create a site for you personally to use, for example, I have a website which I use for adding places around the city, and for adding movies, and for adding personalized notes. So, and I was very specific in the way I wanted it to work. So I wrote custom modules, I wrote a custom theme, I changed the way it works just so I can do based on my requirements. And that will actually give you a lot of experience. It can actually give you a lot more experience than if you're working based on client requirements, because you know exactly how you want it to be and why you want it to be that way. It will be much more, it will make a lot more sense. So we are getting close to the end, almost. I was told this presentation should be around 40 minutes. So if you have any questions or feedbacks, or if I was talking too fast, if you don't agree with something I said, feel free to shoot now. Was it too intense or not? Yes?
No, it was very nice.
Thanks.
More information that I have a question about
Yes.
the community.
Yes?
Did you ever check the distribution as also social, I think?
Yes. But generally, I don't use distributions for projects, honestly, because most of them, I would give exception to Commerce Kickstart, maybe a few more. I'm not sure about this one, but I know I've used it some, like maybe half a year ago.
Good job, so.
Mm-hmm. Yes, but it's a great point. Whenever you can find a distribution that does some of these things, do check it out. Do create an extra installation on your dev machine. Go in, check how things are set up.
Because it's down Drupal 8. So.
It's an 8. Okay. Okay. I know I checked it when it was 7, so it could be even further back. Thanks. Thanks. But generally, one of the reasons I don't like using existing distributions, I'll just explain my experience, is that I end up kind of fighting more against the system or fighting more against what they set up initially. But it might have to do with client requirements. So I don't know, if your client requirements fit with some of the things that existing distributions provide, maybe go with that. So if you have any other questions, or if you want me to come back to some slide, if you want to add something, feel free to do that now. Nope. All right, so that's it. Thank you very much. I hope this was useful somehow. You have there my email. If you do have some questions, feel free to shoot me a message. That's my Drupal.org username and my website where these slides are available. There is no link yet to the slides. I put them up only today, but I will add them pretty soon. So that's it. Thank you.